It's been a big test weekend, and we miles apart at the moment. But Gavin's back. It looks like you got your Christmas lights on there in the background, Gav.
I
Is
don't
it
know.
almost?
Those are permanent. So if they Christmas lights in, it's Christmas every day for me.
Well, it is. It is for when you're writing about the Springboks most of the time. So a big win. They
And
thought
you're
we
in
have a chance.
Montevideo. You're in Montevideo. You tell me. I mean, that's I always remember Montevideo from 1980. I think the Springboks. Was Mornay still the kid? No, he wouldn't have been. Um, Well, it might, yeah, it was. I think his last game was against France, but Morné du Plessis, obviously. But I remember the Boks going over there and giving. I think it was. Did they play against Uruguay? I think they gave him a good thumping. It was after they'd played the Jaguars. Actually, they played the Jaguars as they were known then, because of course Argentina couldn't be known as Argentina.
Yeah.
It was completely Argentina. But they played in Montevideo, if I remember correctly. There's also Montevideo somewhere in the Free State. I know driving from Cape Town to Joburg, you go past the turnoff to, and I always think of Devet Ross for some reason, even though he's from the Harrismith region, because he played. Devet Ross, of course, who was a great Free State player, played for the Springboks on that tour in 1980.
Well, it is very different. Yeah, we bumped into a couple of Argentinian rugby teams. Funny enough, in Buenos Aires, everything was football, football, football. We didn't really see much rugby. But so far it's just been rugby. We haven't seen much football around here. But a very colourful
Cool.
place. And so far it's been great. Did manage to catch the Boks in action. So let's chat a bit about them.
Okay, cool.
My initial reaction was that it was a bit of a sloppy performance, and there's a lot of rust involved there. And I read your match report, and it was pretty much we agree on that. I just felt that at times, eventually the Boks won the way they know how to win. They sort of went back to plan A and did the basics. And eventually it came through, and it was always going to, that slow poison was going to work. But I just felt for a large part they were very sloppy in the way they played. The kickoffs were, the seats were sloppy, the lineouts were sloppy, and there's a lot that Rossi probably wouldn't be happy about.
Well, when you make to 11, I mean, okay, the last time the Springboks played, as you know, because we were together in Nelspruit, it's probably the last time I saw you. When they played in Nelspruit, that was 6 weeks ago now. And not only has it been 6 weeks since the Springboks played, they also made 11 changes to that team. I mean, who else makes 11 changes to a team that wins 48-7? And it should have been 77, let's be honest. The Springboks made the changes. We know why Rassie made the changes. He's explained it. I'm not disputing that. But when I read about the change, well, when I read and wrote about the changes, I was quite aware that there could be teething problems. And Brennan, it goes back to what we spoke about. I think it was after the All Black game. I think we titled this particular sort of thing on that after the All Black game in Cape Town. I think somewhere in the headline there was the word teething problems or growing pains. Growing pains. The Springboks still have growing pains when it comes to the new philosophy. Whilst you've been away, there's been quite a bit of talk there was talk from Rassie last week. I think he was interviewed by the Guardian in the UK, and I also saw Rian Oberholzer, the CEO of SA Rugby, interviewed in the Times by Alex Lowe. I don't know if Alex actually spoke to him himself. He was picking it up from somewhere else. But anyway, the quotes were there. And they were talking about setting the Springbok brand and wanting to sort of entertain as well as, just win. I mean, so most South Africans have that attitude of like, as long as the Boks win it, a ven is a ven, oh Paul, that old saying. But it's no longer like that for South African rugby. It's almost now that because they want to sort of make up a bit of a gap that the All Blacks have on us when it comes to the brand. They want to be more entertaining, and it's now sort of all about winning with style. So I think they were trying to win with style yesterday, which might be a bit naive when you make as many changes as you have made. If you think about it, I mean, the stars of that game in Nelspruit weren't there. Okay, Eben Hetzebeth was there, but the other guys like Peter Steph du Toit only came on later in the game. Marnie, I'm not saying he should play ahead of Andre, but he was huge in that particular game with his play near the gain line and that. So there were sort of massive differences in the team that played yesterday.
I also got the feeling that, well, first of all, I mean, I agree. I think some of the loose trio, I think what Russie's been trying to do is almost get to a point where it doesn't matter who he slots in, everybody should be playing in sync. And I used that word in sync yesterday.
Yeah, he did.
And if you look at that loose trio of Marco, Elrich, and Quagga, it's not one that you feel is one that's going to click straight away, because they're very unique players, all three of them. They don't complement each other like Sia, Peter Steph, and Jasper do, for instance, in terms of their skill sets. So I think that was part of it. The other thing is as well, I also said last night to somebody, Scotland have always been a team we struggle against. We struggle against them for 60-odd minutes in every game. I think of the game in Nelspruit. I think of the game when Makazole left Stuart Hogg lying on the floor there in Edinburgh a couple of years ago. We tend to struggle for 60-odd minutes, and they tend to roar against us, but then eventually lose. So in many ways, that probably wasn't a very different result to what we normally see against Scotland.
Well, I mean, it was the result that I would have expected. I think I went for the 12-point in my SuperSport preview. I think I went for a 12-point win. It was more or less what I expected. But when I wrote my preview on Friday morning, I hadn't seen the team yet. If I'd seen the team, I might have been even more conservative. I was nervous. I was nervous about the game just because this Scotland team is a lot better than the Scottish teams we played in the past. And they played well yesterday. I mean, I was in Stellenbosch a few weeks ago when Glasgow Warriors beat. In fact, I was in Durban the week before that when they played against the Sharks. And the Sharks have a very Springbok-laden team at the moment. And although the Sharks deserved to win, there were several periods in that game in Durban when Glasgow Warriors, with all their Scottish internationals, gave the Sharks a good go. And then they outplayed the Stormers really in the game in Cape Town a week later. In Stellenbosch a week later. So I've got quite a high regard at the moment for Scottish rugby. They don't have the depth like South Africa have, and that's why they have to rely on South Africans to bolster them. People forget that Hugh Jones was actually a Stormers player 6 or 7 years ago, and he was brilliant again yesterday. His passing game wasn't brilliant, but when he's very difficult to bring down, and he's very slippery. Seun Tuipulotu as well, taking the ball up. There's not too many centres that are as good as he is. And I thought the newcomer at the back, Tom Jordan, played well. But then there's their loose trio who were all over the box at the breakdowns, like trying to disrupt. And I think that you'd probably agree with me that the referee let a lot go there as well. And it contributed to the Springbok error rate.
Yeah, I think the breakdowns were a mess. I mean, and Scotland got away with quite a bit there, and good on them. They're always going to try and disrupt the Springboks. That's one of the things they do. Teams try and do. But I thought Jaden was put under a lot of pressure. That affected the service to Andre. It affected the service to the backline a lot of the time as well. I didn't think Jaden had a great game. I think he really struggled under the circumstances, and especially the game they wanted to play. Maybe it's something to do also with the new rule with the box kicks, where you're not allowed to put the defender up. But he certainly didn't have a game that he would have probably been proud of. And we probably will see some changes for the rest of the tour anyway. Grant Williams is probably the guy who's going to long-term take over. But Rassie obviously wants to give everybody a chance. I think the other thing as well is Scotland, I felt there's some things. I was listening to the British commentary on the game and not the SuperSport commentary, and they also remarked that Thomas du Toit's try, for instance, was just a stroke of bad luck for Scotland because South Africa messed up the line out. It bounced into Thomas's hands. There was no defenders because everyone was up for lifting the line out jumper, and I mean that's something you can't really control as a team. And they had one very, very good try disallowed. So if some of those things went their way, it would have been a lot closer test match. But you always got the feeling the Boks were probably going to pull away at some point in that game.
Look, it's so difficult to say what Rassie's going to do because we're far away from, I used to be on every tour and then you knew what the coach was going to do because you go to training and you'd speak to people. And Rassie also isn't predictable just because he changes his selections a lot. But I would expect that there will be another scrum half because I think it could also be Kobus Reinach. He did play some of the big tests this last year, and he also sort of suits, just like Grant Williams, he suits the Boks temper, the sort of temper that the Boks play at the moment. And going back to the Sharks game in Durban against Glasgow Warriors, and also their subsequent game against Munster, I just do think that I've thought for a while that maybe Grant Williams, given John Plumtree wants to play a sort of more of a tempo game. I've always felt that Grant Williams might be the better bet there. To me, Jaden sort of takes the step. There's a step that he takes. I know we've often said that about scrum halves in the past. We say, well, this guy takes too long. But I definitely think there's a difference between how long Jaden takes to clear the base and how long the other two. And when I say the other two, I'm talking about Grant Williams and Reinach. Is there another? I don't think there is another scrum half on tour, is there? There's the three.
It's just the three, yeah.
Okay, so given the way that Rassie will probably want to give everybody a game, I would imagine that whether he's a starter or not, I would imagine Kobus Reinach will be part of the mix this week against England.
Yeah, I think the one thing that brings Jaden back into this is also the law change now with the box kicks. Box kicks suddenly become a lot more important again, as we saw in all the internationals this weekend. Yeah, the chasing wingers now, it becomes a contest again, so you need a good box kicker from the base. So I suppose that does bring Jaden back into it as well. But yeah, he didn't have the greatest game yesterday. I think we both agree on that.
Well, that's not a good law change. I mean, if it's going to make the contestable kick more prevalent than it already is, people don't like contestable kicks. Remember the box kicks. Remember when the Sharks played against the Bulls in the Currie Cup final? I think it was during the COVID times. I remember how poor old Sean Everett was slated by everyone because that's all that the Sharks did in that game. But at that time, it was the thing to do, and we go back to that thing. We're going to go through that same cycle. That's the problem with the lawmakers. I don't know. Sometimes just don't understand it.
Well, I don't either. I mean, I've been quite vocal about this as well. I mean, I just feel the more they take one step forward, they take two steps back. I thought, well, this weekend the red card probably worked well because I didn't think that was. I felt that was a bit of a harsh red card. Although,
I thought it was a great example of why you should have a 20-minute red card.
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah. But yeah, just to me, I think part of the problem with World Rugby is they don't actually know half the time. They keep on wanting to speed up the game and keep on wanting to have more ball in play, but ball in play doesn't really mean entertainment necessarily. And you get to the point where just at one point you're confusing fans over and over. Every year there's different laws they have to get used to. The commentators have to explain it every single season. At some point we must just settle on a game.
Well, I think that the one of the problems with rugby is that the coaches are cleverer than the referees and the lawmakers.
Yeah.
And they have been for years and years. I go back to Ian McIntosh and his direct rugby, but once we started borrowing stuff from league for our defensive systems and things like that, I think that the coaches are a step ahead of the referees. And I had a conversation actually during the week of the All Black Test here in Cape Town with Jaco Paper, who of course was a referee and has now joined the coaching group. And he said to me, I mean, in conversation, it wasn't to be quoted, but I'm sure he won't mind. He said to me, he said, we just miles, the referees. He said, I've realized now that I've come here that the referees are just miles and miles behind. It's the coaches who do lead. And that's the problem. So in the years that I've been a rugby writer, and that started off in 1990, it's almost like been this, in fact, there's a column coming here. I can feel that maybe that's my talking point tomorrow, is that there's been this, the struggle of the lawmakers to keep up with the coaches, but the coaches are always ahead and they're leading that race.
And in the end of the day, you leave the refs to make over 200 decisions, and then we complain when one or two of them get them wrong. And that's not fair on them either. And I mean, I've had this conversation with several refs over the years, and they tell you about how many decisions they get marked on, and they make 198 out of 205 they get right. But we all harp on the one, which is also wrong of us. But you can understand why fans get upset about these things. But
human nature.
I was going to say just one thing interesting what you mentioned earlier about Rhiannon. I also saw some of those articles. It seemed like there was a real concerted effort to go and sort of sell the game to the British press, because there was quite a few of those type of articles around. And it's interesting that South Africa has now decided. I mean, we've always been considered, we don't care what the world thinks about us. We'll go out and play our game, and we'll try and stop us. And it's now interesting that they want to start. That's obviously got to do with the value of the brand and marketing the Springboks with the equity deal and all that. And that's a whole separate discussion, that one. But it's just interesting to see us suddenly become these, well, we want to impress you type guys,
Yeah, no, it is. And it's like, it's almost like Russie's also departed from his old script as well. It was almost like Russie didn't care, and, it was like win it all. We know Russie. The one criticism I think people have of Russie is that like winning is almost too important for him. It's like he'll do anything to win. But just lately he's gone out in this like sort of almost like this marketing campaign, and he seems very, and I'm not talking about right now, I'm talking about this whole year really. And it might even have started, going back now to the appointment of Tony Brown as the attack coach. Now I'm sort of suddenly seeing, well, maybe there was method other than just getting the Boks to be better and to be a better all-round attacking team. There might have been method in that as well, in the sense of like change the Bok. I was going to say change the dynamic, but in changing the dynamic of the Boks, also change their sort of reputation and the way they're perceived by the outside world. Get more neutrals to get in behind the Boks. to tune in to watch the Boks play based on the Boks's their aesthetic value, if you know what I'm saying. In other words, how spectacular they are in playing the game, and there definitely feels like that there is that switch, and it's the right one to make as long as you don't sacrifice results along the way.
Yeah. Well, so far they've been lucky that they haven't done that. So I also thought maybe it was part of the strategy of getting ahead of this England week, because I think we all know at some point, and I think it's probably a good thing that Tom Curry is probably not going to be involved in the game, just given the history between the two sides. But yeah, it's always sad when a player misses a game. Just put that caveat on it. But yeah, we all expect there to be some sort of controversy this week, drummed up by the local media guys, and so for me, I think maybe that was part of it, is trying to get across and engage the British writers before these things begin, and say, hey, look, we're not the bad guys you keep on painting us out to be. And that's interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays this week. England are going to be very desperate. Steve Borthwick's under a lot of pressure. As I saw, I think the Guardian put it this week, last night in their match report, was he keeps on focusing on this game plan he believes in, but keeps on blowing up in his face, which I thought was good. I mean, we can move on to those games anyway now, but I mean, just on the Boks, I can see them going back very much to the Nelspruit sort of team selection for this game.
Marnie at fly half.
Well, maybe not Marnie at fly.
I can't see that at Twickenham somehow.
I was more talking about. I was more talking about the rest of the team, not so much.
Yeah, they'll go back to their strong. They'll go back to their strongest team. Yeah, I'm not so. Look, I mean, I'm a big Marnie fan, as you know, but just going into a Twickenham test because if Marnie plays and Hondre doesn't, then you don't have a recognised goal kicker. And I think when you go into a Twickenham game, you've got to have that reckon. I mean, apart from maybe other factors related to the possible weather condition. I don't know what the weather forecast for Twickenham is like, but I mean, we saw how Marnie bottled it in the wet weather in Paris last year in the first part of the game against, and that's why Hondre came on and played for the rest of the World Cup. But otherwise, yes, I agree. I mean, we'll get Damien Delendi back. It's always like, look, I mean, I always sit as an outsider and look and think, because I'm not there, I sort of think to myself, well, isn't it a risk that, like, in Damien Delendi does run into the field now on Saturday in the 12 jersey. It's the first time he's worn that jersey in 7 weeks, because it will be 7 weeks from the Nelspruit test. And we saw a little bit of rust yesterday, and we're going to go into the Ireland and All Black game, and I do think that there was a lot of that in the Irish performance as well. Rust does play a role, and you don't want to be rusty against the All Blacks. You want to be at the top of your game. And England, I mean, I don't know if we're going to do a preview later in the week. Maybe we should talk about this then. But England have now had 2 tough games, one against All Blacks and one against Australia. Okay, they lost those games, but they've sort of played some tough rugby. Whereas there might be guys in the Boks team on Saturday that haven't played since Nelspruit, and to me that is a bit of a concern. But then I know Rassie, and I know he would have planned, and he's probably doing assimilated practices, match situations and practices. That's what he does. So and we've often seen guys come straight in from being cold to doing really well in the Rassie era.
Yeah, I think you look at England this week. I think desperate's the obvious word that comes up, but I sort of wonder if they're going to revert back to the same sort of game plan they did in Paris, because it worked very well against the Springboks for a large part of that game. But I think they're probably the team they got now is probably a better attacking team than the one that was in Paris as well. They've got and Marcus Smith, looks like he's in really good form at the moment as well. So if I was England, I would probably attack the Boks, because there are some gaps there, as Scotland showed. They did get around the Boks on the outside a couple of times. So and England, they've got pretty decent wingers at the moment.
Yeah, but they've lost the one, I can't pronounce his name, but the Welshman, the guy who's studying medicine in Cardiff and then now ends up playing for. He's from Cardiff and he's studying in the UK. Anyway, Wasi, I mean, they've lost him. He's out along with Tom Curry. So, and he is really good. But if he's not playing, I think they lose quite a lot. So, I'm not as worried about England's attacking ability. I thought that the All Blacks had bottled them up. I mean, if you looked, I mean, that was what to me let England down against the All Blacks, was that their attack wasn't that good, and the All Blacks conceded 1 try in that game, and that was an intercept. It was an intercept try. So I'm not to worry about their attack. And And I think that their defence has got problems. I mean, they're readjusting now to life without Felix Jones. And to me, it looks as if they don't really know where they are defensively in the sense of whether to rush or whether to drift or whether to, and there are definitely holes to exploit there, as the All Blacks showed. So I'm not worried about that. But what I am worried about is that England, when I say worried, I mean, obviously we're supposed to be neutral, we're journalists, but obviously I'm a South African. As a South African, what I'm worried about is a desperate England team. We've seen what they've done before, and I'm not even talking about the semi-final last year where they went from, if I remember correctly, a quarter-final against Fiji when they weren't really good, and they were really brilliant against us for 65 minutes. I'm thinking more of actually Twickenham earlier this year. I'm not going to call it a Lions Stadium. To me, it's still Twickenham. At Twickenham earlier this year in the Six Nations, when they'd actually lost to Scotland the week before, and everybody was caning England, and you know how acerbic the criticism can become and how negative the criticism can become. It just switches overnight from being England or Six Nations favourites to being like completely useless. And that will happen this week. But what happened then was that after the Scotland game, there was all this criticism, and then England went and beat Ireland the following week. And if you can beat Ireland, you can beat the Boks.
Yeah, no, they're a good side. And on their day, I mean, we saw in that semi-final last year, they can really disrupt a team like the Springboks as well. But I think Russia will probably know that. And I think this is the test the Boks do want to win. This is the big one for them on Twickenham, just because of the significance the whole time. Right? England, we seem to enjoy beating England more than other teams anyway. Yeah, I look at it as well. I think I agree with about the defense. I think Australia are the type of team, for all their frailties, they are the type of team that when they do get a ball and spread it wide, they've got some ballers out wide, and they really sort of found holes in that England defense. And Tony Brown would have seen that. The Boks will know where to target them as well. And Ches and Colby and Curtly Orange should be able to find those holes if we get the ball to them in the right spaces.
It makes me think when you talk now, sorry?
It's going to be a tough game either way. I mean, Twickenham's always tough. We know that, but it's not supposed to be easy.
You're making me think that maybe we should play Marnie.
Well, I'm actually
Marnie could. What? Okay, let's go back 2 years. Let's go back to 2022. The Boks actually. It was almost like the beginning of the end for Eddie Jones. I know he carried on in fact, it was the end for Eddie Jones. We retired Eddie Jones. Remember, wasn't it that test? I think it was the final score was 27-13, wasn't it? But in that game, I mean, the Springboks' usual physicality was there and everything, and the good forward play. But what actually really won that game for the Boks, if you remember correctly, was our X factor. Damien Willems, I think, set up a try and counter attack for Kurt Lee. I can't remember all the tries, but I know it was a day where I remember the British press was raving about the fact that the Boks have changed, that they're a leopard that's now changed their spots. They can attack as well as, and that X factor was the difference between the teams on the day. And I think that could be the case again. So there almost is a case for somebody like Marnie to certainly be in the mix and to maybe come on in the second half, because there are problems with that defensive system. Although I'm not saying that with Andre Pollard at flower half, the Boks are missing too much when it comes to the attack either. I mean, I thought he was okay yesterday. I didn't think that he's still not back to what he was like as a youngster, where he was attacking the gain line all the time. But he's he's the Boks were okay. So for a team that was, who I actually thought yesterday was quite good on the attack for the first time in a while, because it's almost like he's got a stepping game back. I know they were only half breaks, but I actually was impressed yesterday with Lekanya. I thought that for the first time in a while, he was getting through those half gaps again, and actually being very slippery for the opposition.
Well, he definitely was, and I think he really enjoyed feeding off that energy that Andre Esterhuizen brought to the game. I mean, he was an agent of chaos, as they call him. I mean, every time I got the ball, the defense had to watch him the whole time because he just made meters. But I think Lekanya enjoyed sort of almost playing off that sort of role quite a while. So we might see that. Although, I mean, Jesse's probably going to play, let's be honest.
No, I'm not saying that Lekanya should be selected. I'm just saying that I'm talking about the Bok offensive game. I'm just talking about the attack and what worked, yes, and saying that, I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, I agree with Russie that we didn't completely gel, and that's because of the selection of the number of changes that were made. But it wasn't like there was nothing, if you know what I mean. There's definitely, and you go back to the guys who know each other well, who've played with each other all year. Not that those, I mean, this is another conversation for another day. Is actually what the Sharks are contributing to the Boks now, because every second player is a Shark. So you've almost got that. So we're almost going to go back to that 1995 template where Kitch Christie relied almost on a Transvaal team to win the World Cup. We're heading in that direction. I mean, you look at that pack; it's just like made up of Sharks. Well, when Sears play, it's also made up of. And then you look at the back yesterday, and if Fussy had been there, it's almost like a Sharks back. Okay, and if Fussy had been there, and one or two others, but it's like it's very much like sort of a Sharks backline, the side that played yesterday.
Yeah, I'm not so quite sure it's the Sharks so much. I thought Vili was good.
Do you know what I'm saying? I'm saying the midfield were both Sharks players. My Pimpy was there, and he's a Sharks player, and the scrum half's a Sharks player. The entire front row is a Sharks player because Thomas du Toit was a Shark not that long ago.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
And then you've got Urban, and then on the bench you've got Vincent Koch, and you've got
if Victor was still on the bench, you'd be worried. But
the Sharks players falling out of the trees and becoming Boks.
Well,
but anyway,
the one good thing about that is that they obviously know each other and they play a lot together. But especially yesterday, the 12-13 and Bapimpi on the wing. Makazole is playing some of the best of rugby of his life at the moment, and I mean, I did a feature on him this week where he also said he's not going to make the next World Cup, so he's living very much in the moment, and he knows he's probably not playing. There'll be the other two wingers this week. I think is Afalili
going to be at fullback?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, he should be at fullback if you think. I mean, they could think about Vili because Vili's attacking ability, but Afalili brings a very different game to the Boks backline. So
I think if you've got Afalili at fullback, you almost go back to a 5-3 split on the bench. That's going to sound like a radical difference to 7-1, but you go back to the 5-3 split on the bench, and you have a scrum half, Moni, and Vili on the bench.
Oh, it could work. It'd be interesting to see what Rossi does. I think we probably have to move on. We're going to start running out of time, so let's move on to the other game. I mean, just quickly, we're on England anyway. In Australia, I thought this win is going to do a lot for Australian rugby and for the belief in that team. They've obviously got some great players, but they still don't have the pack. When I think of what the Lions will put up as a pack against them next year, they'll be a lot more competitive, but I think the pack is still something they have to develop.
I've seen too much rubbish from Australia over a long period of time now to suddenly decide after one game that Australia have it. They're playing Ireland on this tour, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And they're playing. It's just like the All Blacks, actually. I mean, the All Blacks, yes, they beat Ireland, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they do against France this week. So it's to me, it's. To me, the jury has to be out. You can't. I still have a very strong recollection of that game where they shipped 60 points to Argentina, who also, by the way, thrashed Italy this weekend. It's been an interesting weekend for rugby.
Yeah, you got to give them credit. To win at Twickenham, to score 40-odd points is not nothing. So and as I say, I mean, this will do a lot for their belief. I mean, Joe Schmidt's got a monumental task to try and build that team before a Lions tour. I just thought this weekend was probably the first time we saw something positive from them, that you thought, well, that test series could be competitive.
But here's the thing, which is actually what I was going to say earlier on when we were talking about England, and we were talking about their attitude and everything when they're playing against the Boks. And this is almost what I was trying to sort of say, or certainly what I was thinking about saying earlier when we were talking about this, is that when you're playing against Australia now, there has to. I know everybody says, "Oh no, you've got to be up. They'll be up for the game and everything." And we're taking Australia seriously. I'm not saying that they underestimated Australia, but there surely is a different mindset when England go against this Australian team. I'm talking about at the weekend, than when they go up against the Boks at the weekend, where everybody's expecting them to get beaten. This is the game where England are proper underdogs. Whereas against Australia, they weren't. And against Australia, I think England had, I think Borthwick said afterwards, the weight of the jersey. We know that we lose to Australia, because Australia are 9th in the world. They're actually in the same ranking now as Fiji were when they beat England before last year's World Cup. And we know what a calamity that was. So you suddenly got in a situation in a game against Australia where you've got fear of losing rather than that sort of hunger to win. Against the All Blacks, not so much in the previous game, because you can't ever say, well, I'm favourites against the All Blacks, and everybody loves to beat the All Blacks because of their long-standing standing in the game. But I just think that the mindset against Australia might have been different for England to what it's going to be against the Boks this week. And that's what I'm saying, though, is going forward now, teams are forewarned about what Australia can do. So that's why when they play against Ireland, I'm going to be interested to see what happens then, because Australia suddenly have a reputation again. They're going to come up against an Ireland team that's not going to sit back and say, oh, we're just playing the Wallabies.
Yeah, no, that's true. No, fair point. Fair point. I think I'm going to throw one curveball. Ireland, New Zealand. Ireland just looked, well, fair enough. Rust. Let's give them that rust. But they just looked a shadow of the side that was in Durban, and there was a couple of times, especially in those last 10 minutes, where they were chasing the game and they needed to kick the ball away a number of times. Didn't really look like they were interested in winning that game, and I just wondered, have they reached their peak under Andy Farrell? And maybe that's a controversial statement, but certainly the All Blacks looked a lot better against them, and this All Black team has improved significantly over the last couple of months.
Well, the All Blacks have played 9 games since the day that they played the South Africa in Durban. You remember we went to Bashi's place. We watched the England New Zealand game on TV. Since that particular day, which was the 13th of July, New Zealand have played 9 games. This was the first time that Ireland had played. So I think that rust factor is a significant one. I know a lot of those guys play for Leinster, but the fly half doesn't. I mean, there's like key players that don't play for Leinster. So I think that Ireland had the same problem as the Boks had on yesterday. But they were playing against the All Blacks and not against Scotland, and that was the difference. I just think that, again, with Ireland, the jury's out. I agree with you. I mean, and there's another factor too. There's actually another factor, which is that your coach is actually disappearing in 2 weeks' time, because Farrell's basically going to focus on the lines after this. So he's not actually going to be in charge anymore. Is there the same sort of sense of discipline and wanting to get out and prove yourself to him if you know that he's not going to be there for a couple of months?
That's not an excuse, because let's be honest, they're number 1 in the world. They want to tell everybody they're number 1 in the world.
It's not an excuse, but it could be a reason for what's happening. I mean, nothing's an excuse. It's just that I saw an article somewhere, and this is related to the round ball game, talking about Manchester City's problems at the moment. And the suggestion there was that maybe Pep Guardiola needs to let people know whether he's staying or whether he's leaving at the end of the season, and then there will be more clarity at the players. And if he's staying, they might play harder for him. It's the same thing. I'm just saying this isn't something I thought about until we spoke about it now. But it just came into my head that he's got 2 more games, and then he's not there. He's going to the Lions. So that could be it. It's not an excuse, but it could be one of the reasons. I'm just saying that it's premature to. I mean, the previous game that Ireland played was against the Boks, and they won that game. Although my caveat there is that the same thing holds true for the Ireland series in South Africa in July. Is what I'm saying now is that the Ireland had played. Well, they played a whole 6 nations subsequent to the World Cup, whereas the Boks hadn't played at all. And I remember thinking during that Ireland series, everybody was raving about Ireland, how great they were to win that second test. But I was thinking to myself, if they played against the Boks later in the season, if they played against that Bok team that played in Nelspruit, I'm not so sure Ireland would have won that game. And that's really what I'm saying.
Look, I take the point. I just think when you're number 1 in the world, and that's what their fans like to tell. I don't say the team so much because they're not so vocal, but the fans like to tell everybody that they're number 1 in the world. Then you need to wear that mantle, and the All Blacks and the Springboks know how to wear that mantle. Not always well from a Springbok point of view, but yeah, you've got to take those challenges. And if you can't get yourself up for an All Black game, if you can't, they just look off. Yeah,
I'm not saying that they went up for it. I'm not saying they weren't motivated. I'm just saying that there's like a little bit, the little things were out of sync. They haven't played for a while. I just think that World Rugby's. I don't know who does the fixture list, but Ireland should have been playing should have been playing the All Blacks later on in November rather than their first game. That would have been great for Ireland if they'd started against. Mind you, Argentina would give them a good go as well. But it would be if they'd started against a lesser nation and warmed up that way. Then there would be no excuse. Then you can't say, well, they lack shot. I mean, that was the good thing about the Boks winning yesterday is they were playing against a Scotland team that had a very good warm up opportunity against Fiji the previous week. So it wasn't like Scotland had any rust.
Yeah, and Scotland were still very sore after that World Cup. I've heard it several times from several people around there, how they felt they never fired shots in the World Cup against the Boks. Yeah, and I don't think we should underestimate how much Scotland wanted to win that game yesterday. They were, Gregor Townsend's under a lot of pressure. He hasn't beaten one of the top 3 sides in the world, and he's going to be very keenly watched by he could be out of a job after this autumn series or after the Six Nations if he doesn't get a win somewhere. The interesting one will be Ireland, Argentina. Argentina I just saw the highlights of that game, but they looked rampant against Italy. There was a couple of cards involved, but they certainly looked like a team that they put the hammer down against Italy. And it's hard to judge that game, not having watched the full game. And then, France made mincemeat of Japan, and Eddie Jones is having a tough time there in Japan at the moment. They're struggling. And then the big shock of the weekend was, well, I suppose in a way, Fiji beating Wales. They've beaten Wales before, but it was their first win ever in Cardiff. And Warren Gatland's got quite a few problems.
Yeah, he has. Are they Warren Gatland's making, or is it like the system there? I think that's the question that's got to be asked. Yeah, look, that's the other thing about the Boks on Saturday against England is that they can go for broke as far as I'm concerned, because there's no ways they're gonna, and I'll say it now, there's no ways they're gonna lose to this Wales team, even if they send for reinforcements back home and send a whole different team out there. Wales are just struggling at the moment, and they really. I don't know what they're going to do, because I don't think that the coach is the problem. We've seen a couple of coaches go. I can't remember what the guy's name that brought him up to South Africa. I didn't think he was such a bad coach. He was a Kiwi, wasn't he?
Yes,
yeah.
I've got his face. Dan
Biggar was the captain, and that's it. They came out here and they actually played quite decent rugby on that tour in 2022. And that, to me, they've gone backwards since then. I mean, partly because of somebody like Dan Biggar isn't playing anymore. But Welsh rugby just okay. The URC teams have been a bit better this year, but it just seems in such a parlous state.
Yeah, they've got structural problems in the URC sides. Their player budgets are down, and they're also not picking players who are playing in France as well. So they've lost a couple, and they haven't really replaced players that they've lost. I'm thinking the Alan Wynne-Jones, the Dan Biggers, those type of thing. Those guys. But I mean, what we saw before the World Cup last year, you probably see a similar type of game that the Boks play them. Probably see the Boks playing the new guys on this tour. So you probably see Cameron Honeycomb and a Walker Lowe getting their shot finally. And I think it'd probably be a bit ironic to play Cameron Honeycomb, seeing as Wales we're trying to get him against Wales. That'd be good. But there's problems in Wales. This weekend, as you say, France, New Zealand, that's going to be an interesting one to watch, because all I heard this weekend was how great Antoine Dupont was, because he had a couple of backflip passes but you're playing against Japan, you almost expect that. Yeah. So it's a good test for New Zealand against one of their bogey teams. I say bogey teams in inverted commas, because it hasn't been for a while. But Ireland, Argentina should be interesting. Us against England should be interesting as well.
Look, if All Blacks beat France, that means that they've beaten England and they've beaten. Who did they beat this last? I'm trying to think. Of course, Ireland. So that means they've beaten England, Ireland, and France on successive weekends. That's almost like what the Springboks had to do in the World Cup last year to win the World Cup. So then kudos to New Zealand. I think that the fact that they've had two such tough games will probably count against England at the weekend. Against New Zealand. And I'm not sure what happens with the world rankings if we lose to England and they beat France. I'm not sure, but it's. It certainly adds this whole thing about the rankings, this whole debate about the rankings, that adds interest to the series of matches. But France, I didn't actually see France play against Japan, so I can't really say too much about them. But I do think that they're almost like a bit of a sort of operating behind a giant operating below the radar at the moment, because everybody was talking about Ireland because they were #1 in the world. But France, when it comes to young players coming through, I mean, this is the thing: is that to my mind, you and others might be right when you say that Ireland are coming to the end of an era, a great era. In the sense that there's a lot of old guys. I mean, they already lost Johnny Sexton, of course. Whereas France, it's just like, to me, it's just like there's going to be turnover. They've got players that can come in. They've got great young players. So they, I mean, a lot of people thought that if it wasn't for the fact that they ended up clashing in the quarterfinal, France and South Africa would have made a great final at this last World Cup. Don't bet against them playing each other in the final at the next World Cup.
Yeah, well, it was a great quarterfinal, probably the best half of rugby, test half of rugby I've probably watched in a long time, if not ever. But yeah, it's just, I mean, France are a very decent team. I just find the discourse around Dupont, to me, is a great player. I just find it. It's like there's nothing else to speak about. And France has got so many other good players in their side, and everyone seems to concentrate just on one guy the whole time. I find that irritates me a bit, but that's a personal thing. So it's going to be an interesting round of weekend. I think we must wrap up, otherwise we'll be talking for hours, Gav.
You also have go and have a holiday.
I will do, and we'll put this up on YouTube. And listen, if you watch this and you have some strong feelings about what we said, let us know in the comments. Be very interesting to see. And as always, hit subscribe, and we'll get Gav back again to chat a bit about the test matches a bit closer to the time. Hopefully before the weekend, if we can carve out some time from our schedules. Okay.
Once the teams have been announced, I'm hoping that Rugby does it early this week. I mean, the thing of naming a team on Friday just doesn't. You're not used to it. It's hopefully it'll be announced tomorrow or Wednesday.
Yeah, then we can chat again. Okay. Cheers.